Russia launched its invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Most global observers expected a swift Russian victory. They predicted Kiev would fall within days, perhaps weeks at the most. The Kremlin itself operated on an even more optimistic timeline. Its internal documents suggested a plan to decapitate the Ukrainian government and seize control of the country in under 10 days. This expectation was not a minor miscalculation. It represented a fundamental misunderstanding of Ukraine, its people, and the nature of modern conflict. The entire operation was built upon a series of flawed assumptions that guaranteed failure from the very start. This misjudgment was not born from a lack of resources, but from a profound political delusion. Russian leadership genuinely believed that Ukraine was not a real state. They believed its population would welcome Russian forces as liberators. This narrative, promoted for years by the Kremlin, filtered out any contradictory information. As a result, the invasion was planned not as a full-scale military campaign, but as a special military operation led by the FSB. The plan relied on speed surprise and the rapid collapse of Ukrainian political will. It was a strategy based on wishful thinking, not on a sober assessment of the military realities on the ground. The evidence of this misguided optimism was abundant from the first hours of the war. Captured Russian soldiers were found with parade uniforms, packed for a victory celebration in Kiev that would never happen. Their operational maps and orders were shockingly vague. The war was lost in its conception, long before the first shot was fired. The assault on Hostomel Airport, just outside Kiev, perfectly encapsulates the failure of Russia's initial war plan. The operation was meant to be a masterstroke. The plan involved seizing the large cargo airport with a small force of elite VDV paratroopers flown in by helicopter. Once secured, massive Il-76 transport planes would land airlifting thousands of reinforcements and light armored vehicles. A small contingent of Ukrainian National Guard conscripts armed with little more than small arms and older man-portable air defense systems was waiting. They met the incoming Russian helicopters with intense fire, shooting down several and disrupting the landing. Ukrainian defenders took steps to render the runway unusable, preventing the large Russian transport planes, already airborne and en route from Pskov, from ever landing. Simultaneously, Ukrainian artillery began to shell the airport. By nightfall, the operation was a complete disaster for Russia. The elite airborne troops were cut off, and the air bridge they were meant to establish was destroyed. It forced the Russian military into a bloody, grinding ground assault on the outskirts of Kiev, a battle of attrition that exposed every weakness in its logistical and command structure. Russia's military struggles in Ukraine are deeply rooted in its adherence to an outdated Soviet-era military doctrine. This doctrine is characterized by a rigid, top-down command structure that stifles initiative at lower levels. Unlike Western militaries, which empower non-commissioned officers to make tactical decisions on the battlefield, the Russian system concentrates authority at the highest echelons. This centralization creates a force that is inflexible and slow to adapt. When plans go wrong, as they did at Hostomel, junior officers and soldiers on the ground lack the authority and training to improvise, leading to paralysis and predictable, costly frontal assaults. This systemic weakness is exacerbated by the chronic underdevelopment of Russia's NCO Corps. In NATO forces, NCOs form the backbone of the army, serving as the critical link between officers and enlisted soldiers. They are experienced leaders responsible for training discipline, executing small unit tactics. Russia has historically failed to cultivate a similar professional NCO Corps. As a result, its units suffer from poor cohesion, a lack of tactical proficiency, and an inability to execute complex maneuvers. The contrast with Ukraine's military culture is stark. Since 2014, Ukrainian forces have undergone extensive training, with NATO partners embracing a philosophy of decentralized command and small unit initiative. Russia's failure was not just a failure of equipment or numbers, it was a failure of an entire military philosophy. Perhaps the most visible aspect of Russia's failure has been its catastrophically slow adaptation to the realities of 21st century warfare, particularly the dominance of drones. Well, While Ukraine rapidly embraced and innovated with unmanned aerial systems, Russia remained locked in a Cold War mindset, prioritizing large, expensive conventional platforms like tanks and warships. The battlefield quickly demonstrated the vulnerability of this approach. Inexpensive, commercially available drones gave Ukrainian forces unprecedented situational awareness, allowing them to spot Russian formations, guide artillery with pinpoint accuracy, conduct direct attacks on armored vehicles, conduct direct attacks on supply depots, conduct direct attacks on command posts. Ukraine's approach to drone warfare was decentralized, agile, and open source. Volunteer groups, small tech startups, and even individuals in garages. This grassroots innovation allowed Ukraine to iterate and deploy new capabilities in weeks or months. From simple quadcopters dropping grenades to sophisticated long-range first-person view kamikaze drones, Ukraine built a vast and varied drone arsenal on a shoestring budget. Ukraine systematically dismantled Russia's powerful Black Sea fleet using homegrown naval drones, targeting and destroyed or disabled roughly 40% of the fleet. Ukraine won naval dominance without a navy. 3 years into its full-scale invasion, the comprehensive failure of Russia's military campaign is undeniable. Credible estimates place Russian casualties at over 1 million killed and wounded. This rate of loss is unprecedented in post-World War II Russian military history. In exchange for this sacrifice, Russia's territorial gains since February 2022 have been minimal. It controls approximately 20% of Ukrainian territory. Military power is no longer defined solely by the size of an army or the number of tanks. It is defined by the ability to learn, innovate, adapt to changing battlefield realities. Russia, trapped by authoritarian political structure and rigid doctrine, proved incapable of change. Its failure was the inevitable consequence of a system that prizes obedience over initiative and fantasy over fact.